Greenie, our next guest is Tyler Robison, the force behind TnT Sports Cards, one of the hobby's most trusted bulk grading submitters. TnT has built a reputation on consistency, transparency, and understanding exactly what modern collectors need. Tyler's team handles thousands of submissions each year, making one of the most informed voices on how grading changes impact collectors in real time, and that is certainly happening this week. We are glad to welcome him back to the show, Tyler Robison.
Tyler, what's happening?
What's happening, guys?
Nothing. The last time we had you on, we were previewing a card show and things like that, but we have a lot of stuff to get into tonight that is very hobby related, that you guys are kind of the semi-front lines that's going on with PSA. So we, instead of just kind of speculating and reading and hearing, this is what they're doing, we figured we would bring someone on that really knows exactly what tiers are being affected, how long things are going to be affected, if we even know that. So we just want to kind of jump right into that with you. And I think Haley can pull up some stuff and tell us a little bit about exactly what you know that's happening at PSA.
So effective today, only submission levels that are going to be available are going to be regular and above for PSA. So no value bulk, no value plus, no value max. Seen a lot of the turnaround times, even for some of the higher tiers, get extended. And I guess it's just one of those things to where, the hobby as a whole just wants to, they want to grade more cards than what the grading companies can handle right now. And obviously PSA being the biggest, they're definitely facing the biggest challenge. I guess some of the numbers you look at, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. Last year they graded 19 million cards. This year they're on pace to grade 25 million. And that type of an increase isn't enough, which is, kind of crazy. So, the question is, I guess, what they announced, the backlog was around 10 million. I personally think that number is a little bit higher. I think there's some reports floating around that since the announcement that those tiers were going to be shut down, that they've had 200 or 2.5 million cards submitted. And I think those initial reports are probably 24 hours old, maybe 48 hours old. So, what does that mean? Do they get an influx of another 4 million, 5 million cards? It's hard to say. It'll be interesting when they put out there, because I've been looking on their website. I haven't seen an update yet, but that tracker, they said they were going to have a public tracker on the backlog. It'll be interesting to see what that real number is when it's updated. Because right now what they're grading a little over 2 million cards a month. Their opening value tiers probably start with value max, then value plus once it gets down to that 5 million number. As far as the backlog goes, so they definitely got their work cut out for them. I don't really have a lot of answers, except for, their preliminary estimate was 4 to 6 months. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes longer. What I'm interested in is, what is that going to look like for the rest of the grading companies? Because what PSA is telling you, I'm guessing they were probably getting somewhere between 3 and maybe 4 million cards a month, right? So they're telling everybody, we can't take on, you're going to have to send 2 million, 2.5 million cards elsewhere for the foreseeable future while we work on getting caught up. Well, what happens if those cards end up getting evenly distributed between the other grading companies? Right now, CGC is grading about 600,000 cards a month. Beckett, I think on the last report for May, was at 150,000. SGC and TAG are, right around 50,000, right? So if that gets evenly distributed, that's going to shut them down too. So it's kind of scary when you think about
it. Yeah. So you mentioned the regular tier is open. What for For people that don't know, like what does it cost to submit something regular through
So
that
regular
team? What
is
type of card?
$80 or $85. So really that kind of shuts you out to where if you're
And that's
submit a card, it has to be like $500 or more for it to really make sense, right?
right. And, I mean, and that there are so many ways that we can go with this. The 10 million backlog, and we talk about it all the time. There's so many cards that don't need to be graded, but people are told to grade your cards, so they
Mhm.
open the pack. You get a base Steph Curry top strong card. You think you need to grade it.
Yep.
That's the reason that they're so backlogged, and I think a lot of it is TCG too,
Oh,
right?
that's a big chunk of it. I mean, I think they're grading like 1.5 million Pokemon or TCG cards a month. It's just crazy. I mean, you even go back to like card shows. 3-4 years ago, card shows used to be 70-80% sports, 20-30% TCG. Now it's almost flipped, in a lot of your shows. I mean, outside of, like, I would say the Great Lakes show was predominantly sports. I would say that the Shipshewana Card Fest is predominantly sports. But you get outside of that, like the Lansing Mall show that we go to every month, that's probably in that 30% sports, 70% TCG. And it wasn't like that 3 or 4 years ago. So, and why is that? I mean, the money in Pokemon is in probably one piece, that just really took off this year is kind of crazy because you can take a $20 or $30 card and as a 10, now it's $200 or $250. And pop counts don't seem to matter. It doesn't matter if there's 4,000 or 5,000 tens. You're still getting that type of an increase, which in sports you don't get that. It's like a 2.5 to maybe 3 times multiplier from raw to a PSA 10. So I think you've seen a lot of sports people even shift to TCG. So just because of that multiplier that you get from grading. So.
Tyler, I was going to ask you in the same vein about collector behavior. You've got a backlog of at least 10 million cards, maybe more, as you indicated. What that says for collector behavior over the last few months. You touched on as well that's an influx of TCG and other and Pokemon and other related cards like that. What does this do for the collector? If there are cards, take us through. If cards have been shipped and those cards are now sitting in a warehouse somewhere that have been paused. What does that do to the market? There's 10 million cards out there that people have submitted and now they don't have access to. Can they obtain their cards again? Do they wait? How does all this work for the uninitiated collector?
I mean, unfortunately, it's one of those things. I think you're just kind of in a waiting game. I think it probably increases. I mean, there's still going to be cards obviously coming out on a monthly basis, right, from PSA and the other grading companies. But I think it does, for the time being, I think it helps graded values, across the board. I think that it definitely helps raw value. I think, especially like on these new releases, sometimes I think, you see those huge sales early and they drop off fairly quickly. Maybe they don't drop as quickly. It's just going to be a little bit of a different way of collecting. I think it impacts repackers quite a bit, because part of the, thing with the repackers is that new shiny toy, right? That's how they, really like to try to drive their products. And most of the repacks are graded cards, right? So I think some of that, there's going to be a little bit of a shift of what maybe you see in repacks. That's something that I think could be fairly interesting.
What about the price of like a PSA 9 card, right? Because there used to be such a huge drop off as recent stuff. PSA 10s were real high. PSA 9s, people were saying, well, those are just raw.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now when the value plus or whatever it was $25-$30 to grade that card. Now, when they ever open up again, I don't know what the pricing is going to be, but do you think that there'll be more of a demand for PSA 9s, maybe even PSA 8 cards?
I would think there should be. I think, the hobby's kind of gotten a little bit snobbish to where at PSA there's only one grade that matters, right? And that's a 10. If it's not a 10, then, most people won't pay a premium. A lot of, like you said, I mean, 9s typically get raw value. 8s typically get below raw value, which, I mean, it really shouldn't be that case. I mean, you see the reviews, and we track it. I mean, we review about 3,000, 3,500 cards a week. And of the cards that actually pass for grading, it's typically in like that 35, maybe 40% range. So the quality control from the grading companies, or not the grading, but the quality control from the manufacturers is not very good. And if we don't pass a card for grading, that means we think it's going to be below a 9. So, most cards that are pack pulled, a majority of them are not going to be a 9 or better, right? So, you would like to think that should hopefully have a little bit more of a positive impact on 9s, because there's a lot of nice cards out there that are PSA 9s or even PSA 8s.
I think a lot of collectors, not flippers, not investors, but I think a lot of collectors prefer to have 9s in their collections. Yeah. Like, for instance, I'll just tell you, like, last year at the National, I bought a Michael Jordan autograph card I gave to you to grade. Mm-hmm. I 100% planned on selling that card or keeping that card because I knew it was a 9 with a 10 autograph. Well, I didn't know it was a 10 autograph, but you graded it and became a 10-10. I had to sell it because of the premium. But like, if that card was a 9, I would still own that card today.
Yeah.
I don't mind keeping 9s in my collection.
No, I think you could see more of that.
Which would drive up the price of 9s because people aren't going to pay 10s, but they'll pay a little bit of a premium to get that nice 9 in their collection.
Well, and there's going to be, I mean, for the repack portion of it, I mean, they're going to have to buy 9s, which could help drive the price up on 9s, because it seems like that really dictates a lot of the singles market.
Tyler, for the average collector sitting on a stack of cards right now, what's the smartest move they can do? Should they hold, pre-sort, switch grading companies, focus on selling raw? What advice do you give?
So if you're switching grading companies, I think there's a little bit of an opportunity. I think it'll be a short window, though, because I do think that this will trickle down, and the domino effect will be that we'll see this across all grading companies. They're going to have to shut down. I mean, you've already seen it with TAG shutting down some of their service levels. You've already seen CGC increase some of their turnaround times. But if it's me personally, like if I'm submitting or people that are sending cards to us, I think CGC is a great option for the TCG space. They're very well respected there, and you do get a nice premium on 10s, through them, and of course they're pristine 10s. But I think you could see a big shift in Beckett. Beckett plays well in TCG, but they've also, them and PSA used to be, really whichever slab you like best is what you went with, because value-wise, a True Gem Plus at Beckett was worth the same as a PSA 10. So I do think you'll see an initial spike at Beckett. I think they have the biggest opportunity to regain market share, especially on the sports side. From a cost standpoint, they're fairly, reasonable, typically a little bit cheaper than PSA on most stuff. But I think right now Beckett would be my first choice. It's a matter of how long can they stay open? There's a little bit of a positive, I think. They were consistently like 75 to 100,000 cards a month from a grading standpoint. Last month they hit 150,000. So, hopefully you'll see them be able to scale and ramp up, how many cards they can take on a month in a month out basis. But, I think they're probably the best option right now. It's just going to be a matter of how long they can keep up with a big influx, which I would expect them to have.
Do you think that we'll go back to having these value prices tiers? Like, do you think that they're going to go back? Like, are they going to reopen that?
I would think so.
But how many people are going to like save millions of cards? If you add up everybody, Like, is it just going to happen again? Is this a cycle that's just going to keep happening, or are they just going to hire so many people? At
I mean,
some
they
point?
plan on what they say. They want to hire 1,000 people. I mean, PSA already has they have a place they have a grading operation in New Jersey, in Florida, I believe in Texas as well, a couple out of the country, I think one in Asia, Europe, and they plan on, continuing to have a bigger footprint in other areas. I think it's just one of those things. How many people do they need to hire? I think it's one of those things. This year alone, they're like 39% up year over year, and it's still just not enough, right? So it really boils down to how many cards is the hobby really trying to grade? That's the number we really don't know. My guess is it's probably close to 5 million cards, and the grading companies can only handle about 3 million cards right now. So, what really needs to happen, hopefully something that comes out of this, they need some real competition that's good in both TCG and sports. Because CGC, they pump out a good number of cards, but it's pretty much all TCG. SGC is really kind of becoming just vintage, right? And then Beckett, they're the one, they're the one that I think has the most room for growth. Anybody that's been in the hobby for a while will remember the times when Beckett and PSA, I mean, Beckett used to be the place for modern. PSA was more of your vintage house. So they definitely have a lot of opportunity. And then Tag, it'll be interesting to see Tag and what happens with them. Right now they can only handle about 50,000 cards a month, but they're working supposedly on technology that they can have in hobby shops, a grading machine right there on site to where people can take their cards and put it in it. And in 5 minutes, it pops out a graded card. Right. So it'll be interesting to see, one, how much money do they have to be able to invest in something like that? How big of a footprint can they have? Because I mean, there's probably got to be at least a 2 million shortage right now as far as the amount of cards that need to be graded that they just can't. I mean, collectively, they can't handle. Which, it's great. I mean, when you really think about it, I mean, one thing it tells you is the hobby's in probably the best place it's ever been. I mean, every single weekend, within an hour of where we live, there's a card show. I know in Cleveland, it's very similar. I mean, the amount of card shows that you put on every single year, and you don't have a problem selling out, do you?
No.
I mean, most cases you probably have a wait list. So,
we have a capacity issue right now. There's only so many places to go to fill them up.
So that's the positive. It's just going to be, everybody's going to have to adapt, and it's going to be a little bit different for, I would say, at least 6 months, because all of these grading companies have a standard that they have to, uphold, and it's not something to where they can easily just throw up an ad. It's not like there's a college where, there's a college pumping out graders, or even a trade school that's pumping out graders, right? That's not the case. So, they got to hire.
There's an idea though.
That would be something. I mean, it's no different than being a plumber or an electrician. Being a grader is kind of like a trade, right? So, they need, something there. I would imagine. Is it something to where a company like PSA with, collectors backing them? I mean, how much can they invest in technology? Do you see AI become a bigger part of it? I don't know, but I mean, the demand is there.
This summer is going to be very interesting for raw cards, and I think maybe the national, not maybe, definitely the national, because that's the culmination of the shows. I think raw cards are going to sell for an absolute premium. Nice raw cards, because you can't buy it. There won't just be an influx of new graded cards. I know they're going to be turning cards back, and they'll have to catch up that 10 million backlog, but there's not going to be a ton new submitted, in the short term. So I think raw cards are going to be a lot of fun at the National.
Yeah, I would agree.
Tyler, you mentioned Beckett, which is the original authority, and it's got the nostalgia factor. I think there's to your point, there's a lot of room for them to pick up market share. Has this sent your business scrambling, or is it business as usual? What kind of wrench did this throw in your process?
We definitely got some challenges. I mean, luckily for us, we diversified about a year ago, right? I mean, there's a lot of, when you're a group submitter, you're relying on the success of other companies doing well, for your own success, which worked for us for a long time. But a year ago, we opened up a card shop, and we've also been pretty active on live selling for singles on eBay Live. We've done it on Fanatics Collect as well, or Fanatics Live. So, thankfully for us, we have diversified enough to where, it's a big source of our revenue, but we're able to pivot a little bit. We are going to have to make some cuts, which is unfortunate. But it's also going to allow us right now to focus on we've had two different projects that we've been kind of waiting to work on that we just haven't had the time for. One of them is our website. We're going to start doing some beta testing next week on that. Our developers are finally done with that. We've been working on a website that is going to basically copy the grading company's websites from a trackability standpoint, real-time updates, communication with our customers, having that all housed in one location. And it's been a long project, but we've got news last week that they were close. Got more news today that they're actually going to come down next week on Tuesday to do some training with us and work out any bugs and so they can make any final adjustments that need to be made. So I'm extremely excited about that because every customer will have their own login. And like I said, it'll pretty much have that same look and feel as all the grading companies. It'll just, give our customers an option. If they grade with us, they can keep all of their stuff organized in one spot instead of having to have accounts with 3, 4, 5 different grading companies. So I'm really excited about that. And then it also is going to allow us, one of our employees is going to be moving, or 2 of them are planning on moving to Florida at the end of the year. And the plan with them was to just focus on breaks and live selling. So it allows us to kind of get them going on that, sooner than later, to where we can, start building that following, because just like grading, if you work with a group submitter, you build that trust factor, that relationship, you typically stick with that group submitter, whether it be us or whether it be Nash Cards or PC Sports Cards. There's a big trust factor there, and you typically stick with who you like if you've had a good experience. Breaking's no different. You break with who you like. You break with the personalities you like. A lot of times, a lot of good friendships, end up being created that way. So this is going to allow us to kind of jumpstart that a little bit. So I'm just excited to some extent to get a little bit of a break over the next 3 to 6 months because it's just going to make us stronger when it opens all back up. So.
Yeah, sometimes a break isn't such a bad thing. I know that people are going to complain that they can't grade their cards, but such is life. Take a little break, focus on something else. You have to pivot. We've all done that in this industry. So now is the time to do that. And, listen, we appreciate your insight. We look forward to still submitting cards with you when we can. We'll get the higher price cards there, which is fine. So listen, Tyler, we do appreciate it. We're coming up towards the end of the hour, but we're glad that we got some insight from you and everything that you do to help us out. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Wish I had a little bit more, but we'll see.
That's all right. Tyler, thanks for joining us this evening as always.